Hello, everybody. Welcome in to week 6. Going to be breaking down the college football main slate on Draftkings. That's for Saturday, October 9th. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Hopefully, you find this information useful. I break down every game on the slate, try to provide you information to help you set your lineups. No, I'm not a tout. I just do this to provide free information. So, hopefully you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then nobody's forcing you to watch, right? If you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, you know where to find me in the comments or down here at YonkerCFB on Twitter. So we got a 12-game slate here. There's some lower over-unders than last week's slate. Last week's slate was crazy, man. There were a number of games that were up in the 60s. And then you had Ole Miss, Alabama, which is the game everyone targeted. Should have been an easy fade. I played too much of it. It was too much of a square. I should have seen that coming. But yeah, that game was up in the 80s. Nothing like that on this slate for the most part. There's some Big Ten games on this slate. I haven't done great personally the last 2 weeks. Probably if you're following the show, that means you haven't either. So looking for a bounce back week. Again, I usually go over some of the players I like, some of the players I don't like, but it's not the end all be all. The main goal of this show is just to provide you with information to help you set those lineups. Prizepicks, sponsor for the show, over here. Use promo code Yonke, YONKE, all caps. That's down there. You get up to $100 in instant deposit match money. That's a 100% deposit match. So you put in $100, you get $100 back. You put in 50, you get 50 back. And you only have to. It's only a one-time rollover. So you get $50 and then you bet that and you win. Then you take it home. Basically, if you're new to Prizepicks, it's a projection over under. You can hit fantasy points, rush yards, pass yards, receiving yards, etc., etc. Single player props. You can add those together. You can do multi-sport entries. I know they've had some good MMA offerings lately as well. But they have everything on there. Prizepicks is awesome. Having a ton of success on that platform. It's actually been more successful for me than Draftkings by far so far this year. So we'll see if we can turn this around, right? This is the Draftkings show. I know I keep saying the last couple of weeks I'm going to get a Prizepicks show going for college football. I'm still trying to do that this week. There's a number of obstacles. It's not that I'm just saying I'm going to do it and not following through. One, obviously timing. Extremely busy this year. Woke up at 2:30. Not recording this at 2:30, but to do my prep for this video and do some other things as well. Extremely, insanely busy during college football season. There's so many teams, so many games. In order to stay on top of it and have an edge, you got to go balls to the wall. So that's one. But even when I do have time, I had timing last week. I think I have time this week. Some of these lines just don't drop until pretty late. So in order to give you guys the best offerings, the lines that I've been hitting that mostly have been winning, a lot of those don't come out until game time, and they don't get steamed the same way because they drop so late. People don't have time to steam them. That's when you get the juicy offerings. You still get some good offerings earlier in the week, like Tyon Evans was 13.5 last week, but not quite as insane. So long story short, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do that. If the show doesn't work out, if I'm not able to record that on Friday, if there aren't enough offerings, I'm just going to post them on Twitter. So give me a follow there. All right, let's go ahead and get started. South Carolina, Tennessee, first game on the slate. It could be a sneaky game here. We have an over-under at 56.5. Basically, why we are that high is because South Carolina's offense isn't great, but Tennessee's defense is not great either, and Tennessee plays at a very high pace. Actually, first in the country as of last week. So all the pace metrics I'm using, I think it's from Chris Hummer on Twitter. Sorry if I got his name wrong. The guy at 247sports.com goes through and does plays per minute. So I usually try to use that whenever possible. I only have his last week's data, so I don't have this week. So shout out Chris Hummer. But yeah, so it might be a week off. But anyway, they're first in plays per minute at 2.99, running extremely high tempo with Josh Heupel. Their defense is not great. So while we haven't seen South Carolina do very much this year, they played some pretty good defenses. Even played Troy last week, who was one of the better defenses in the group of five, certainly one of the best in the Sun Belt. They've played Georgia's defense. So while they don't have a fantastic offense, their numbers are kind of skewed because they've had some tough matchups. All right, so they had a coach as their quarterback, Zeb Noland, a GA, who is no longer their quarterback. So now we got Luke Doty, extremely fast. One of the best athletes on the team by all accounts. Just hasn't really put it together. Not a great passer. I feel like he has rushing upside he hasn't tapped into. You see that the rushing numbers are pretty ugly, but it just doesn't really match up with the athleticism he has. In a sneaky, paced-up game here, Luke Doty at 5.5. I think he's too cheap. I don't know if you want to go down that far, but you can certainly make a case he has some appeal here. As far as the runners, Kevin Harris started the year injured, but he's kind of coming into his own as of late. He had 47 snaps the last 2 games. The next closest running back, because it was a 4-way timeshare to start the year, the next closest running back was Juju McDowell, and he had only 14 snaps last week. So I think Kevin Harris has taken over at 5,000. I do think he's too cheap. You take a look at this Tennessee defense. They're only allowing 3.1 yards per carry on the season, but are they going to keep doing that all year? I don't know. You see here, he's faced some really good defenses. I wouldn't call Kentucky very good, but their rush D solid. You can see they're trying to get him the ball. Had 49 receiving yards last week. I think you could do worse than Kevin Harris. Again, South Carolina's not going to be any must plays, but I think you have some sneaky options here. Throw one in your lineup. You probably shouldn't stack Doty if you're looking at their wide receivers. However, it looks like Josh Vann, he has 16 targets over his last 2 games. Looks like he's a little dinged up. Jalen Brooks has really come into his own. He didn't really know much about this guy going into the year, but he has 17 targets over the last 2 games, which is pretty decent going against a bad Tennessee defense here. Sounds like Vann is probable. That might scare me off a little bit. I think the pricing might be a little off there. We saw Vann had 2 big games earlier in the year, kind of came out of nowhere. It was a tournament killer. Is that going to continue all year? Probably not. All right, Tennessee, man, yeah, they blew up last week. First thing you got to know about that, Missouri's rush defense, probably the worst I've ever seen at the Power 5 level. I'm trying to rack my brains to think of a worse rush defense, and I can't do it. They're awful, awful, awful. It's an embarrassment. Really hurt us last week with Jabari Small. Played a ton of him. I guess should have just gone with the the lower owned guy and Tyon Evans. Had some of him, but not enough. But yeah, just blew up last week. So anyway, Hendon Hooker is the quarterback. Took over for Joe Milton, which if you listen to the show, if you listen to anyone who knows what they're talking about, they would have told you Joe Milton is not the answer. Hendon Hooker at 7.9, that's a little expensive. Like I said, he does like to run. They are going to play an extremely high tempo. Anytime you see that combination, they're a good option. I won't talk you off them too much. As far as stacking options, again, he's a runner. You don't need to stack him. Velus Jones was very good for us last week. They raised his price a lot. He's seen 17 targets in the last 2 games. Tillman's seen 11, and Peyton's seen 11 in that span. If you're looking at the average depth of target, Velus Jones, while he does have those 17 targets, only has 5.4 ADOT. 5.4. So they're not even running him down the field. That's like a John Mechie type number for Alabama, where it's just killer because they're not running him down the field enough. But you could see in a pace game, 4.6 isn't bad. Other than that, these guys around 4,000. You could do worse. Jalen Hyatt's very talented, but just isn't on the field. Callaway, the tight end, at 3.2, does get some targets, so he's probably a little bit too cheap. As far as running backs, yeah, man, mentioned it with Jabari Small. Josh Heupel always splits carries between his running backs. Always has, probably always will. That's why we were on Small. I think it was the correct play. It would have been a killer play. They ran for whatever it was, 240 yards, 4 touchdowns in the first half. Kept the backups, the scrubs, kept getting touchdowns in the second half. Jabari Small would have gone off last week. He got, I think, the first 3 carries in the running back room, and it looked like he injured his shoulder when I was watching. Limped off the field, didn't come back. They said it's an undisclosed injury. He was injured before that. I think it was lower body before that. Forgive me if I have that wrong. Sounds like he just can't stay healthy. So Tyon Evans, this is his backfield at 6.9K. Like I said, he's going to split the work usage, but it's going to be a pace game, and he does get some receiving work as well. So off that monster game last week, probably a lot of people will look to him as 10.5 point favorites, 56.5 over under. You could do worse, right? It's yet to be seen who's going to step up behind him because, like I said, there's always going to be multiple fantasy relevant running backs. So I think I'm going to do a little more digging in. Whitehead, Pierce, and Wright, these guys all had about the same amount of carries last week. Didn't really get a feel for who's going to be the 2A guy this week, so I'm going to keep digging. If I find out anything there, I'll send it out on Twitter, but nothing strong enough yet. All right, let's move on. One of the big games on the weekend, I guess Penn State, Iowa might be bigger, but this is the game I'm probably the most excited for. Red River Showdown. You got Oklahoma versus Texas. Oklahoma minus 3.5 favorite. Texas, over-unders at 63.5. Yeah, Spencer Rattler hasn't really gotten the job done this year. Basically, Oklahoma's offense, they've been fine. It's been really weird. So usually this Lincoln Riley offense is really predicated around explosiveness, right? They have been for years and years, always been explosive. This year, they're top 5 in success rate, but they're over the hundreds in explosiveness. They can't get any explosiveness going. It's really weird. They're not throwing the ball downfield. Every single one of their top 4 wide receivers that I'll mention here, they all have an ADOT below 10. Just shows you they're not throwing the ball downfield to anybody. It's really strange, especially when Rattler's the kid who's supposed to have a cannon. It's not what you would expect going into the year. I think he's okay at 8.3. I could make a case this is going to be you're going to have a lot of points scored. A 63.5, when probably all the public money is going to be on the over. That shows you maybe we shouldn't expect a million points, but still, this one's probably going to be back and forth. I think, what is it, the last 5 years? Forgive me if I have that wrong. The last handful of years, this matchup's been decided by one score, less than one score, one score or less. Whatever. It's been decided by one score. I guess it can't be decided by less than one score. Whatever. Is the extra point less than one score? Because you can't, technically. I don't know how that works. Anyway. Yeah, so Texas, they didn't look fantastic last week against TCU. I think they might have been a little lucky to come out with the cover there. But Oklahoma just hasn't really been working, like I've been saying. So are they going to get it going this week? I think you could point to some metrics, maybe. Texas's rush defense, in the one true match they had where they got tested, they got torched by Arkansas. Rush D is bad. I think the secondary is okay. It's worth monitoring. Josh Thompson, one of their top cornerbacks, he was out last week. I haven't seen if he's going to play yet this week, so monitor that. If he is out, I think that definitely does help a Rattler play. I don't think he's a priority. You could stack this game, but it's probably going to be higher owned than maybe even it should because of these two teams' names, right? So you can maybe fade this game more than often. The wide receivers are too cheap, but while saying that, I can't really tell you who I'm going to be playing. It's just kind of a mess. You have last 3 games, Mike Woods has 18 targets, Hazelwood 15, Mario Williams 13, and Denzel Mims only, is his first name Denzel? Marvin Mims. Denzel Mims. That's the guy on the Jets. Sorry, Marvin. He only has 8, so he's starving for targets. Starving Marvin for targets over here. Only 8 targets. Like I said, all their 8 outs are below 10. They're kind of eating into each other. Mario Williams continues to be underpriced. They've shown. So you're probably going to look at the snap data and say he's not out on the field very much, but I'll tell you, it's the exact same way they were using Marvin Mims last year, where it just didn't matter. If they're going to throw the ball, they want to get the ball to him, they're going to get him on the field when they want to get the ball to him. Freshmen probably don't trust him blocking, whatever the reason is. They want to get their older guys snaps, but he's going to be getting some targets, so he's probably too cheap. Definitely too cheap. I don't know if he's a fantastic play, but he's too cheap. All right, other than that, the running back room, they've really been splitting the workload. Like I said, they could have a big game here. Texas does struggle tackling a little bit, but they just haven't ran the ball very well. They've ran the ball successfully, but it's like 5 yards a pop. No big plays whatsoever from the run game either. All right, as far as Texas, they are averaging 558 yards of offense in Casey Thompson's 3 games. If you listen to the show, you know or anything I do, I've been saying they should have started Casey Thompson all year. But here they are. They finally started him. I don't think he's super explosive. I think he kind of gets the job done. Dink and dunks, is mobile. I think he's okay in this spot. You're probably relying on some rushing touchdowns if you think he's going to get the job done. Could be a leverage play if you're going to play him over Bijan. 7.4, I think that's a correct price. As far as any stacking options, any wide receivers, they flipped the prices on Jordan Whittington and Xavier Worthy this week. Whittington's at 5.8, Worthy's at 5K flat. Last 2 weeks, Worthy's really taken over. Has 10 targets. Sorry, I think I went 3 games back here. I think my notes are wrong. I don't think he has 20 targets in the last 2 games, so must be 3 games here. But yeah, he has 20 targets to Whittington's 12. Average depth of target, Whittington has 14.4, and Whittington has 15.8. So they are throwing the ball downfield to both these guys. While I said the explosiveness isn't great, it is there. I will say TCU is one of the worst defenses in the country at allowing explosiveness, so maybe that threw off that average depth of the target just a little bit. I think Worthy's probably too cheap here. Joshua Moore's been banged up, even if he comes back, hasn't done much at 3.6K, and anyone behind that has done absolutely nothing this year. All right, running back, obviously, Bijan Robinson. I don't really know what there is to say about him at 9.3K. He's a beast. He has 480 rushing yards over the last 3 games. Probably the most talented running back in the country. And he's been getting crazy usage. Steve Sarkisian, as the coach, seems he's the new Najee Harris, right? He wants to feed him all the carries. I think they'd be wise to get him receiving work in this one. We saw Deuce Vaughn couldn't get anything going last week on the ground, which we were correct in predicting. However, had 10 catches for however many yards he had. Just tore him up in the running back game, in the running back passing game. I don't see how you don't go to that here with Bijan Robinson. I think that is a little bit of a slightly underutilized game part of their offense to this point. I think that it could make them very dangerous, especially if Casey Thompson isn't pushing the ball downfield too much. At 9.3, though, he's really expensive. And like I said, this offense did crumble when they faced Arkansas. And I think Oklahoma's the second best defense they would have faced. Oklahoma's defense, you can poke holes. The numbers aren't quite what you'd like them to be, but they have a ton of athletes, and the strength of this defense is their defensive line. So if Arkansas was crushing them with a 3-man front, I have to think this Oklahoma defense might have a little more success than some of these other cupcakes they've been playing. All right, Arkansas Ole Miss, going to have ownership interest in this one, obviously. 66.5 over under. Currently, Ole Miss is -5.5. Don't have a strong lean. Big fan of both teams. Both teams usually pretty profitable to bet for, although not last week, certainly. Both got blown out. Both are coming up super tough losses, so you have the hangover effect for both teams. Obviously, Ole Miss has the Alabama hangover that everybody knows and loves. But then you also have the Georgia hangover for Arkansas, which I think is going to be even tougher in this spot, given how physical Georgia is, given how badly Arkansas was beat up, emotionally and physically, just as badly as you can possibly get beat up. Their dual threat quarterback, KJ Jefferson, is hobbled, which is obviously worse for a dual threat. And then Treylon Burks, their star wide receiver, has been kind of hobbled a little bit all year long. So I think this team is beat up pretty bad. All right, so we saw Bama lay the game plan out last week, right? You got to win at the line of scrimmage against Ole Miss, and you have to control the ball. That's pretty much it, and keep pounding it, not letting them get high flying. Problem is, Arkansas, while they do have Sam Pittman, got him super, super high on, coaches up that line extremely well. They were absolutely dominated in the trenches by Georgia last week. So both teams dominated in the trenches. Whoever wins the line of scrimmage here, I know that sounds simplistic, but if Arkansas has a ton of success at the line of scrimmage, then they're going to win this game. They're going to control it. They're going to run for a lot of yards. I'm not totally convinced they're going to do that. I think they will have enough success to have. The problem is they split the workload up too much. So I don't really know who's going to be fantasy relevant in this matchup, but I could see that happening. At the same time, I just don't think, I don't think it's comparable. Like Alabama laid out the game plan for their Alabama. Defensively, they could make that happen. A lot of teams aren't going to be able to make that happen. Anyway, let's look at these guys here. KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, like I said, he's banged up. If he wasn't banged up, I'd probably own a ton of him here at 6.9K with that high of an over-under. But how much is he going to run the ball? Had 5 rushing yards against Georgia, 50 against A&M is pretty good. If he was running, that's the primary interest. I'm very high on KJ Jefferson's fantasy ability when he's healthy. When he's not healthy, that takes away what he does best. I expected this guy to have 10 plus rushing touchdowns this year. He's huge. He's like 245 pounds, behemoth. Hasn't really gotten the passing game at all, which does make me a little nervous. And like I said, they probably are going to look to run this ball like they have in the past, like they did against Texas. They probably view this matchup similar to Texas, although obviously I think Ole Miss is much more dangerous than Texas due to the play calling. Maybe the guys on the field, maybe not quite so much, but Lane Kiffin versus Steve Sarkisian. Sark didn't have one single adjustment that entire game. It was pretty embarrassing. Anyway, running backs, they split the workload. I wouldn't look to their running backs. If you're going to play one, I wouldn't pay up for Traylon Smith. Sounds like he's had like a turf toe or something going on all year, not fully healthy, and they split the workload 3 or 4 ways anyway. AJ Green at 3.8K. This guy's a home run hitter, freshman. Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders at 3.6K. Really like that guy at 3.6. But again, the work usage isn't great. Like if you told me every single one of these guys got below 10 carries, I'd say, yeah, that sounds about right. So you're hoping on a home run from those guys. All right. Treylon Burks, 6.3. Yeah, this guy's a total beast. One of the best wide receivers in college football. He has, let's check the target data, 21 targets in the last 3 games. No one else has more than 6. So he's pretty clearly the only way you would look to in the passing game at 6.3. I think he's a fine option. He's okay. He's worth mentioning. All right, Ole Miss. Everybody knows Matt Corral was the Heisman favorite going into last week. Not so much anymore after Obviously, Bryce Young got the better of that matchup. Now he's the favorite. But 10K is really expensive. Didn't really pull through for me. I played too much of him last week. He was way too high owned anyway. Should have seen through that, but didn't. That's on me. At 10K, yeah, I think he probably has a pretty big game here. Nice bounce back spot, but at the same time, Arkansas has a fine defense. They've really limited passers very well. That's pretty expensive. I don't know. On one hand, I want to play the bounce back. On the other hand, it's Ole Miss. They're probably always going to be highly owned anyway, and they're really expensive. So they're fine. Drummond's the top guy, 14 targets. Sanders 10, Jackson 5 over the last 2 games. Again, my notes are messed up. I'm pretty sure that's over the last 2 games. So Drummond's the top guy at 7.7. He's a little expensive. While Mingo remains out, looks like that's where we're going to see Jackson down there at 3.6K. I think he's too cheap. Got 5 targets last game against Bama. Took a pretty tough hit. Didn't seem to get as many targets after that one. He got rocked pretty damn good. Braylon Sanders at 5.5K got a price jump after a bad game. Don't really like seeing that. I think he's fine. Like I said, 10 targets. That's decent. I think Sanders and Jackson will step up with Mingo out. I think that they're okay options. As far as the running back room, I don't really typically play a lot of Ole Miss running backs because Matt Corral gets a lot of rushing usage, gets some of the touchdowns, and then they really split the usage between 3 guys. Ely at 5.5, Parrish at 4.8, Connor at 4.2. I can't really recommend either as strong plays against this pretty good Arkansas front, even though we saw Bama run all over them. Once you dig into it, I mean, the yards per rush wasn't really fantastic. Robinson had 36 carries because they had the ball so much and they kept stopping them. They kept getting short fields. This Arkansas front's pretty good, so I don't have a ton of ownership interest in these running backs, but they are cheap. A lot of people will probably look at Ely and tell you he's too cheap, which maybe he is, but Ely just doesn't really do it for me in tournaments. All right, West Virginia versus Baylor. This one should be pretty quick. Not really a huge fan of either team. There's not really much to say. Normally, Letty Brown, we love his usage. At 6.5K. Normally, we love that price. Kind of laid a stinker for us. He had 18 points. That's not bad against Texas Tech, but if you're getting 18 points against Texas Tech, I don't really think you can predict with a ton of confidence he's going to get more against this pretty good Baylor defense. When we look at the EPA numbers, expected points added, West Virginia is only 103rd in rushing EPA, whereas Baylor's 2nd in rushing defense EPA in the entire country. So I don't think you can predict a huge matchup, but he does have a lot of usage, and if you want to pivot, he'll probably be low owned. All right, yeah, Jarrett Nagy, we skipped him for a reason, man. This guy just can't really get the job done. Not really a fan of his work, to be honest, but if you told me he got you 18 points in this matchup, I'd tell you sure. So as a super cheap option at 5.5K, quarterback for West Virginia, I mean, you go there if you want to. All right, as far as wide receivers, last 3 games, Winston Wright, 22 targets, Sam James, 25, and Bryce Ford Wheaton, 13. Sam James he's kind of their deep threat. He has a 13.9 ADOT. Everyone else is not very high on this team. I will say, Wright, I've mentioned a few times, one of the better kick and punt returners in the country. Actually, I'm not sure if he returns punts, but definitely one of the better kick returners. He's pretty talented, and they're finally giving him the ball, and he's done pretty well. Baylor's quarterback, Jerry Bohannon, 6.1K. He's a dual threat. But West Virginia's defense is pretty damn good. We've seen them in a lot of tough matchups. We saw them against Oklahoma. I pretty much always full fade Baylor, and that's pretty much what I'm going to recommend here. Snead is their top target getter. Thornton's right behind him. Thornton does have a higher ADOT, so you might be able to convince me he's a better play. But Ben Sims, their tight end, gets some decent usage at 3.7, but you'd be hard-pressed to convince me to play much of any of these guys. Abram Smith had some big games, but he splits usage with Tristan Ebner, and they got a lot of cupcake matchups where you put up those good stats. Against West Virginia, I don't know if you can expect that. Okay. Maryland, Ohio State. This is an interesting one, obviously, because our over-under 69.5. Maryland listed as 20.5 point underdogs. 20.5 point underdogs. All right, yeah, Maryland. Shout out to you guys for the prize picks last week. Him, Talia, and the running back Tyson Fleet Davis were pretty easy unders on pretty much everything. At 6K, I think Talia's too cheap. This Ohio State defense just isn't good. They made Davis brand for Tulsa kind of like a world beater, beating the secondary. They've had problems for 2 straight years. Are they going to start figuring it out? I mean, I don't know. Probably eventually. They're too talented. But, I mean, this Maryland team is all offense. I think Maryland could score some points. I'm definitely going to be looking at Ohio State to score some points. Probably most people will be as well. But it's just kind of too obvious, right? Looking at Maryland, Talia at 6K, like I said, he's too cheap. He had a total dud, 5 picks against Iowa. But they actually were moving the ball at least a little bit against Iowa. Not great, but he's had more than 23 points in all of his other games. You look at the matchups there, they're kind of cupcakes, but West Virginia has good defense, and he put up 28. West Virginia probably has a better defense than Ohio State, so you can make a case for Talia. I don't hate it at all. There's some quarterbacks here a little cheaper. I know last week everyone was so expensive. This week, there's some cheaper options. All right, so big news with Maryland is Dante Demas, their best wide receiver, is out. I don't know if they announced he's out for the year. He had a pretty bad injury. Let's see. Yeah, he's out for the year. So the obvious guy to step up here, we have some really cheap wide receivers. Raheem Jarrett's probably going to be the guy who's decently owned. I played some of his overs on Prizepicks. At 4.1K, that's too cheap. This is a very talented kid. I don't remember if he was a high 4-star or a 5-star, but one of the bigger recruits they've had in a while. Had a decent year last year, off to a decent start this year. He's kind of the obvious guy to step up, and he has not done anything. 17 yards in his last 2 games, but he's still managed 2 touchdowns in that span somehow. So the fantasy points per game are boosted, right? He hasn't really done much to deserve that. Just a couple short touchdown catches. But he's too cheap as their go-to guy, in my opinion. Okonkwo, their tight end at 3.8K. They get him the ball a little bit. 10 targets in the last 2. Jeshaun Jones at 3.5K. This guy's right behind Jarrett in targets at 3.8K. He's another obvious guy who would step up. He will get the start against Ohio State. I think Jarrett and Jeshaun Jones are fine options this week. Running back room, it's a total fade for me, even though this Ohio State defense isn't great. I never like playing Maryland running backs. They split the usage. I'm just not really a fan of them at all, so I'm not going to waste my time. Again, with that high of an over-under, you could do worse than just randomly going out there and playing one of those guys, but not for me. All right, Ohio State, yeah, CJ Stroud, good for us last week. I didn't play enough of him. I kind of mentioned I thought they were just going to blow out Rutgers, and they did. And I think he had, 4 touchdowns in the first half, 5 overall. I just didn't have quite enough of him. Why didn't I have more of him than Matt Corral? I don't know. Kicking myself, kind of reevaluating. Had some extra time this week reevaluating. Should have more Stroud. Now he's at 9.5K, gets a price boost. Has a fantastic matchup here. Ohio State's offense is 3rd in the country in EPA. Maryland's defense is 103rd in defensive EPA. So, huge mismatch. CJ Stroud's going to be fine. Not much to say. Elite option. Chris Olave remains more expensive than Garrett Wilson, and he probably shouldn't be. Last 2 weeks, Wilson has 17 targets. Jackson Smith and Jiba actually has more targets than Olave. He has 14, and Olave has 13. Smith and Jiba's 5.3, Wilson's 6.8, Olave 7.6. So probably Olave is going to be super low owned. I will say he has the nicest depth of target by far. Average depth of target is 16.5. It's more of a deep route guy. Could be kind of a pivot there to Chris Olave. Garrett Wilson's been a great play for us all year. Are we going to go back to him here? I don't really see why not. I think he's fine at 6.8K. Will probably be decently high owned against a bad Maryland defense. Smith and Jiba, like I said, he looks good and his targets are going up. He's not bad at 5.3. I just think that's a little too cheap. Does he see the usage you'd really like to see? Not really, but this is a very explosive offense. They don't need a ton of usage. All right, so Maryland's defense gives up the 108th in the country in rushing explosiveness allowed. 108th. And Ohio State can run the football, folks. Travion Henderson is going to be the guy. 7.5K. His price keeps going up and up and up, but this is probably about where it should be. I still think he's a fine option. Only has 16 carries combined over his last 2 weeks, but they blew out Akron, they blew out Rutgers. If this is any closer at all, which I think Maryland could score a little bit here. I don't think it'll be like 35-0 in the first half, but we'll see. I think he's a fine option. They haven't really been given a ton of usage to the guys behind him. If Mayan Williams remains out, which let's see. Yeah, I haven't seen anything updated on him. Really hard to find updates on him. He keeps like mysteriously not playing last minute. If he plays at 4.5, I think he's a good option. But Travion Henderson, most talented freshman running back in the country. What else is there to say? Any good matchup? All right. So yeah, pretty much every Ohio State guy's looking good this week. Michigan State Rutgers. Not a lot for me on this one. Over-under's at 50. Michigan State's listed at -5. I think Rutgers' defense is okay. They just can't hang when they're totally out-athleted like they were against Ohio State. This Michigan offense has been pretty good, and they're playing at a decent pace. 18th in the country in snaps per minute, but I don't know if I believe them. I definitely am not going to play Peyton Thorne. Although he's had some good games. He's been very hit or miss, as you see here with the game log. At 8.2K, I just think that's too expensive, right? I would rather go with the cheaper option. As if you're looking at their wide receivers, Naylor 25 targets, Reed 16, Mosley 12, Hayward 10 over the last, I believe that's 2 games. Again, my notes are all messed up, so I need to go back and check. I'll leave a note to make this clear. I'm just kind of trying to guess. I think that's last 2 games. I don't know. They've been feeding Naylor. At 6.1K, he shouldn't be cheaper than Reed. I'm going to guess most people know that. However, Naylor's really underperformed his targets. There was one matchup earlier in the year where I think it was against Miami. I think he still ended up with a touchdown, but it just seemed like he should have had like 3 touchdowns. It just hasn't quite worked out. I think he's an okay option. We just saw this Rutgers offense give up 5 passing touchdowns to Ohio State, but Michigan State is not Ohio State. All right, Kenneth Walker. Big fan of his work. Great running back. 8.1K. I will say Rutgers' defense is not too bad against the run. They held Michigan in check. But Kenneth Walker's been an absolute beast. If you go ahead and take a look at his usage, 24 carries, 19 carries, 27 carries, blowout, and then 23 carries. So elite usage, pretty much elite production. They're favored. Yeah, Kenneth Walker's fine. He's priced up there for a reason. All right, looking at Rutgers, Noah Vedral, not a big fan of his work whatsoever on the show at 6.3K. No, thank you. Rutgers has no explosiveness. They're 110th in the country. However, this Michigan State defense has given up a ton of explosiveness, 126th in the country in explosiveness allowed. So, and normally that would point me to a lot of Bo Melton at 4.6K, their best wide receiver. But he's injured. So he's dealing with an apparent shoulder injury. When I've been researching him this morning, did not see anything that pointed me one way and the other. They weren't really providing updates, just kind of a we'll see approach, which makes me nervous. If he does play, I'll probably have a decent amount of Bo Melton. 18 targets in the last 2. A decent average depth of target, 14.8, which we just saw Western Kentucky throw all over this Michigan State defense. Now, that's Western Kentucky. They're doing something special there this year. Zach Kitley, somebody hire that man, like a Power 5. Hire him right now. Like, I'm not kidding. Great offensive coordinator. Also, probably the tallest offensive coordinator I've ever seen. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, if he's not injured, I'm playing a lot of Bo Melton. But I guess it does make me a little nervous. Their passing game's not very good. Michigan State's probably the better team, but whatever. Michigan State did have a very good coverage grade going into that Western Kentucky game. After they were torched like that, I bet that went down. So I'm not totally sure what to think of their secondary. It makes me a little nervous. Other than that, Cruikshank, 16 targets, Sanders, 13, Jones, 12. Youngblood's one of the best kick returners in college football, transfer from Kansas State. So if they ever start using him offensively, that'd be nice. Did have a touchdown last week against Ohio State, but I don't think we can rely on that. So Cruikshank was a nice punt play for me last week. Got a price jump. Not sure I'm totally interested. If Melton doesn't go, I think Cruikshank would be their wide receiver 1. Forgot to mention their running backs. Pacheco. Pacheco gets pretty good usage. Not a fantastic matchup. Gets good usage. Probably will see 15 plus carries in this one. Has been in double digits in 3 of his last 5. Or 3 of 5 on the season. 4.5K, he's probably too cheap. Don't love it, but it's probably too cheap. All right, Virginia, Louisville. This one's a game, folks. 69.5 over under. Close spread. Plus 2.5. Virginia is. That's what you like to see. Close spread and a high total. That's what you like to see. For turning plays, for stacking, anything like that. Both play at a high pace. Virginia 13th in the country, Louisville 26th in the country. That's usually a little bit faster than we see Louisville play, so I'm not sure we can rely on that, and they are a running team. I think you have some great plays in this game. Brennan Armstrong, big fan of his work. They're throwing the ball a ton, 46 attempts per game, and throwing the ball well. He has 8.8 yards per attempt. He's killing it this year. Also runs. I'm kind of frustrated he's not running as much as he used to. This guy's kind of like a left-handed fullback playing quarterback. That's what he looked like last year. Now all of a sudden he's slinging it around, throwing for whatever he's throwing for, over 350 yards a game. Kind of confused, but I love it. I'm a big fan of Brennan Armstrong. Apparently this kid said he wants to fight in the UFC after he's done. They said that last week's broadcast 2 weeks ago. And yeah, you could see it. This guy's a gamer. This guy's absolutely awesome. I wish he was running a little more. Otherwise, I'd probably own him everywhere this week. 9.2K, obviously that's an expensive price. It's kind of hard to do a full game stat because everyone's so expensive in this game, but I think it's justified here is what I'll say. Their run game, they don't run the ball. They ran the ball a little bit last week against whatever cupcake they were playing. Oh, Miami. Yeah, that's weird. The fact that Alabama couldn't even run for 4 yards per carry against Miami in the opener, and then Miami's giving up 5.6 yards a pop to Tualapapa. Yeah, I don't know. Miami's a weird team. They're just kind of giving up. But yeah, Tualapapa's their running back, 4.9K. They don't run the ball very much. Louisville actually has a good rushing defense, I think. The EPA numbers love them. Expected points added. They're 4th in the country, rushing-wise, against the run. But against the pass, they're bad, 103rd in the country. So I think that kind of spells good for this Virginia passing offense, obviously. All right, stacking options for Virginia. Last 3 games, Billy Kemp has 32 targets. WISC has 27. Henry has 23, which surprised me because he's only 3.3K. So that's too cheap. And Jelani Woods, the tight end, has 16, and that was only in 2 games. So let's take a look at Jelani Woods. Yeah, I haven't found anything updated on him. I know, what's his name? Bud with Cover 3 podcast. I know he seems to think Jelani Woods is coming back this week. Whatever that's worth. 5.7K. I still don't know if I get there. Especially when Henry inexplicably is 3.3. Now, I will say, there were some concerning things watching Virginia last week. One, they were force-feeding the ball to Keaton Thompson. I don't know why. WISC had 0 targets, 1 target in the first half. They're force-feeding Keaton Thompson. Keaton Thompson is a converted quarterback. He wears number 99. They think it's cute. They list him on the depth chart as a football player. The broadcast mentioned that about 100 times. They think it's cute. It's kind of cute. It's kind of cool. Whatever. He's a cool player. He has a damn cast on his hand. He's playing with a club, and he had about 4 drops. He ran the wrong route about 3 times. They're lucky the ball wasn't intercepted about 3 times because him and Brennan Armstrong weren't on the same page. Stop force-feeding this guy the ball. I get he's cool. You can give him the ball a couple times. He has a damn cast on his hand. He has some good wide receivers. Billy Kemp was open literally every single play all game, especially in crucial moments. Billy Kemp's wide open on a 3rd down play. He force-feeds the ball to Thompson. Yeah, it's pissing me off. So, anyway, Thompson, apparently they want to force-feed this guy the ball at 4.6K. And he can get some touchdowns because he's a good runner as well. Other than that, Billy Kemp, like I said, gets a ton of targets. Doesn't really... Not explosive at all. It's usually within 5 yards of line of scrimmage, 5 to 10 yards. 6.5, he's fine. Probably a cash game play. Dotavian Wicks is the turning guy. I wish he was a little cheaper at 7K. But, yeah, he's going to be the guy who has your average depth of target. He's going to be the guy pushing the ball downfield if they do it all. So, a lot of good plays there. Okay, Louisville. Man, yeah, I said last week with Malik Cunningham. Did I get it right? Yeah, Malik. Artist formerly known as McHale. I said last week, I'm like, there's no way this guy keeps running for 2 touchdowns every single game, is there? Well, I didn't say there was no way. I said he's been a monster. But in order for you to play him, you have to expect him to get 2 rushing touchdowns again here. What does he go out and do? He gets 2 more rushing touchdowns. Almost puts up a 40 burger. Might as well have 0.04 points off. Apparently, he's just going to run for 2 touchdowns at least every single game. Well, no, 2 touchdowns flat. Apparently, that's going to happen. He's going to have 24 rushing touchdowns. That's just the way it is, folks. I don't really see any other way to analyze this. Yeah, so while he remains doing that against a Virginia team that really sucks defending the run, let me go ahead and pull out these numbers. These ones are good. All right, so Virginia's played in 3 ACC games, 3 conference games. They've allowed 764 rushing yards in those 3 games. It's not good, folks. That's 255 rushing yards per game. Yeah, you could have some options for Louisville here. Like I said, it's so expensive. I'd love to do a game stack. It's just really hard. Really hard. I guess if you come back with Rashawn Henry at 3.3K, it is possible. But, I mean, there's just some good options here. I said last week with Jalen Mitchell, he's probably going to have a good game. Probably going to have some good games this year. He's getting some decent attempts. He's a pretty good player. He's now lost a fumble in 2 straight games, and he gets vultured every single time by Malik Cunningham. So I think he's too cheap at 4.6K. I think he's fine. But are you really just going to sit there and get cuckolded again? Holding this guy? I don't know. All right, yeah, you don't really have to stack Malik Cunningham since he's more of a passer. But Marshawn Ford, their tight end, has 21 targets in the last 3 games. He's really stepped up. He's really impressed me this year. At 4.8K, that's a decent price. Watkins has 19 behind him, and then at 4.5K, and then Marshall at 3.4K should not be their 6th highest price wide receiver because he's 3rd in the targets with 15 over his last 3. But I don't really see why you'd play him over Henry at a similar price point. All right, Georgia Auburn. This one should be quick. Basically, I'm kind of a fan of this Auburn team this year. I don't really know why. I'm not really high on Brian Harsin. I'm not high on him as the hire, but it just kind of seems to be coming together a little bit. Bo Nix isn't great, but he has a lot of experience. Running game, they have some good running backs. Tank Bigsby's awesome. Put out a tweet saying Jarquez Hunter, their backup running back, is one of my favorite running back. You know, anytime he has the ball, I just love watching him run the ball. He's awesome. And defensively, they're pretty nasty. They have a good D-line, and they have Smoke Monday in the secondary, which is all you need to know about secondary. They have a guy named Smoke Monday, who seems like he's been there forever. Anyway, they're probably going to get stomped by Georgia. Slow pace. Georgia's going to play at a snail's pace, 107th in the country in pace. If they get the game as they want to, they're going to play it slow here. Probably going to play the under, even though it's only at 47. So yeah, not a lot of fantasy options here. JT Daniels, they keep going back and forth whether or not he's going to play. I'm pretty sure Kirby Smart tried to motivate him. Well, it's a pain tolerance kind of thing. Basically calling him little sissies from Southern California. Doing some soft toss. Yeah, I'm sure Kirby Smart emphasized the soft in that one. Yes, don't play Stetson Bennett at 6.6K. I would think he's going to play at this point. Either guy I don't have a ton of ownership interest in. I guess if Daniels plays, you could get there, but I don't know. Bowers at 6.7K at the tight end. Too expensive. Does lead the team in targets, but 13 in the last 3. But yeah, I don't know. Jermaine Burton's their best wide receiver. Only has 8 targets though over that span. They're just not throwing the ball, folks, and they're not looking to throw the ball. So I would avoid. As far as runners of the football, they haven't been good at all for DFS purposes, and they haven't really been good at running the football for winning game purposes. Not that they've needed to. They are 93rd in the country in rushing EPA. They are 120th in the country in rush explosiveness. So I like to see what their success rate is. I think it's a little bit higher than that, but just not explosive. Not good for DFS purposes. Zamir White, James Cook will split the carries, and even McIntosh and Milton will get behind them. You won't find me playing any one of those guys. As far as Auburn, am I going to play Bo Nix? Hell no. Against Georgia. Yeah, all that stuff he does running around. He's done that since his first game in college. As someone who polls for Oregon, if you'll remember when they played Auburn week 1, however many years ago that was, and this dude just polls. Oregon had that game won, had it won dead to rights. And Oregon just likes to cough games away. Saw him do it last week against Stanford. They'll figure out ways to lose games. But anyway, this dude Bo Nix is just running doing 360s, spinning around in the pocket. Some of the most ridiculous shit I've ever seen in my life, and he is still doing that today. Yeah, I know I said I like them because Bo Nix has experience, but has experience doing dumb shit in the pocket. Sometimes it works. It worked last week against LSU. They probably lose if those passes weren't completed, and he made it happen. So shout out to Bo Nix. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, if he tries all that shit against this Georgia front seven, RIP, RIP. Yeah, don't play the wide receivers. I won't even mention the target data. Well, I guess I should. Kobe Hudson's at 3.6K, and he leads the team in targets over the last 3 games with 20. So that pricing's a little off. Okay, yeah, Tank Bigsby just has not been getting the job done this year. I mentioned on my CFF season-long podcast, he's pretty much only had one encouraging game from a fantasy standpoint, and that was against Penn State when he had 100 yards and a touchdown. Other than that, I mean, he had a good game against Akron, sure. Alabama State, sure, whatever. Georgia State did nothing. LSU did nothing. So, Jarquez Hunter, like I said, I love him, but against Georgia, nope. Full fade. All right, Boise State, BYU. BYU, 5.5-point favorites. Over-unders at 56.5. So kind of in the middle ground here. If you have a strong lean on the total, this would be where you'd either fade or play it. Boise State's offense. Something is wrong with their offense. They're playing at a pretty decent tempo. New offensive coordinator for UC Davis. I was a fan of his work. Looking back at what UC Davis did, hasn't translated whatsoever. They're looking to throw the ball more, but they can't run the ball at all. They have a tough matchup here. BYU's better against the run, but this is a beatable BYU secondary. I've been looking for my spots to fade this BYU secondary. Good team BYU, but the secondary is the weak point. So they've played 3 competent passing offenses. We're excluding USF because they're a joke of a team and a program. And we are excluding Utah because hasn't been pretty there this year. 265 yards or more in every single game they've played against a team with any sort of passing offense. 265 the least they've given up. I think they gave up over 300. And 2 of those gave up over 300 against Arizona. Not a good team. Are they competent? I don't know, but they give up 300 to them. So yeah, I don't think their secondary is great. Am I going to play Hank Bachmeier? No, I'm not a fan of his work. 7K, you can make a case for him. I'm not sure I'm going to do it. Like I said, there's too many factors. Anytime I watch him, it's a very tough watch. I don't know. Khalil Shakir is always going to be a fine option anytime he's on the slate. Last 3 games has 28 targets. Average depth of the target is not super great, but he has a very good matchup here. All right, Stephen Cobbs. Everyone's going to look to him and be like, oh my God, 6.2K. He's averaging a ton of fantasy points. Look at this. He has been impressive. He's a good player, but targets aren't there. Only has 11 over his last 3 games. Absolutely blew up. Okay, my target data must be wrong. That must have not been updated on PFF. Because he had 10 receptions. There's no way he had 11 targets over the last 3 games. I guess there is because he put up 0 burgers before that. I'm going to have to dig into Cobbs. Looks like my data's wrong. I'm going to research this more and update this. I think he probably didn't play over the last couple weeks. Got 11 targets last week, had 10 catches on those 11 targets. Sounds like he was dealing with an ankle injury. That paints a more clear picture. So hold up on when I said fully fade Stephen Cobbs. I need to dig in. I didn't realize this till now. My bad, folks. I'm not perfect. Not even close. But apparently lost a fumble. Yeah, 6.2K, he'd be a decent option. You might get more leverage there against Shakir, but I'm not sure because some people are just going to look at this and see the fantasy points per game and see the price difference. I think Shakir is a vastly superior player regardless and has vastly safer targets. Anyone behind them, not really interested. All right, they're tight end, I guess. If you're looking for a minimum guy, let's see here. Riley Smith. I don't know if they use him enough to consider, but yeah, probably not. All right, BYU. Oh, yeah, we totally skipped Boise's running game. Because like I said, tough matchup here. They split carries. Helani's just had the weirdest year ever. Mysteriously missing games, not being productive when he is on the field, despite running for 1,000 yards as a freshman. Just weird. Habibi Likio, the Oregon transfer, a.k.a. the goal line vulture, a.k.a. Matt Asiata. He's a decent player. He could find the end zone because he always finds the end zone. But tough matchup. Can't recommend it. Too much. All right. Yeah, BYU's a mess, man. Jaron Hall. All reports were that he was going to play last week. And I shouldn't have played any lineups on Friday. I was doing the chain game for the local high school. I shouldn't have played any lineups because I wasn't there to update them. So you should only play DFS here if you're there to update, especially college, because the news comes out late. Make sure you're following, what's his name? College Fantasy Football Updater on Twitter. Make sure you're following him. But yeah, so I had Jaren Hall in my lineups. I think everyone. And they tanked. They said he was going to play. I guess they didn't directly say that, but all signs are pointing to it. And that's what they're saying again this week. He said he's good to go. I don't know. They said that last week at 8.1K. I still don't know if I can get to him. Boise defense really hasn't been very good at anything, in my opinion, but they've been worse against the run. That means we have a pretty good matchup here against Tyler Algier. They've been leaning on him more heavily. Are they going to lean on him as heavily if Jaren Hall gets back? You can make the case either way, because if Hall is banged up, maybe they lean on Algier more, or if Hall's back healthy, you could say maybe they're going to go back to that passing game a little more. And Jaren Hall does steal a little bit of rushing work as well. He's a dual threat. Price has gotten a little out of control at 7.7K, but he's been an absolute monster. I don't really have a strong take either way. He's been a monster. Decent matchup here as home favorites. All right, the wide receivers for BYU. Gunnar Romney kind of killed me last week as well. Last 3 games has 21 targets, leads the team. Also has a good average depth of target at 15.4. So there's some solid indicators. Is it Gunnar Romney? Gunnar Romney. All right, the other quarterback's Baylor Romney, who also was playing and then was hurt. So the Romney to Romney stack. If you played that, I'm not sure it worked last week. It didn't work very well at all. Yeah, I think he's the number 1 guy. I think the pricing is right here. Paua, I think that's how you say his name, behind him at 5.2K, 16 targets the last 3. And then Puka Nacua at 4.2K. I'm a big fan of Puka Nacua's work, big fan of him as a player. But as far as his targets with 11 over the last couple games, I don't know. Seems like he might be the best deep threat, although him and Romney are pretty close. I don't hate Puka Nacua at that price. And that's about all worth mentioning. Isaac Rex, their tight end, very, very, very touchdown dependent. Was last year and he came through. Is still touchdown dependent this year. He's come through twice. Other 2 times he doesn't. I would just play Nacua at that price. Darren Holkler is their second tight end at 3.6K. If he was min-priced, he's a guy to consider, but at 3.6. I don't know. All right, 3 left. What do we have, 52 minutes? All right, we should get out of here in about an hour 15. Wake versus Syracuse. Wake is a 6-point favorite. Over-under's 57.5. Pace is pretty good in this one. Wake, 23rd in the country. Wake Forest, 61st. However, I do have a feeling if this game's close, which the line kind of tells you, or the line's a little suspicious. Syracuse hasn't been as bad as a lot of people thought they were going to be this year. Haven't been as bad as I thought they were going to be this year, especially after they lost to Rutgers. But I know they want to slow the ball down and run. So if it is competitive, it's probably because Syracuse is having some success hanging onto the ball and running and keeping the clock churning. I think that's the game they want to play this year. They've really changed they used to be very up-tempo, and now they're more ground and pound. That's why we've seen Sean Tucker get 1 million carries this year. So that makes me a little nervous. But there's some decent spots in this game. I think there's kind of a wide range of outcomes. Like if Wake blows them out, that could happen. And Wake likes to play with pace. So we'll see. It just kind of depends on who's able to establish their brand, their identity. Sam Hartman's been a great play all year. Kicking myself for not playing more of him last week. I kind of recommended him. It was an obvious play against a Louisville team. Pace-up game, shootout. They've been kind of controlling teams so far, right? And when they finally had a close game, he went great. Syracuse defense has actually been pretty solid, though. When you look at their numbers, there's no numbers really sticking out anyway in this game. No explosiveness numbers, no EPA numbers. It's just kind of close everywhere. With Syracuse as a 6-point favorite, it just kind of jumped out. Once you look at the numbers, it kind of made more sense. So yeah, not really a strong take on any of these guys. Jakari Roberson played a lot of them last week. He was pretty good. The issue with Roberson is he was an absolute monster last year. He was pretty much the only guy getting any sort of targets, and he was getting like 20 a game. That's an exaggeration, but not too far off to end the year. It's more like 15. This year hasn't been the case. Last 3 games, he's been even with A.T. Perry at 5.4K. They both have 20 targets. And then Taylor Morin has really come on, was not an every down player to start the year. He has been the last couple weeks. 19 targets last 3, and he's been on the field pretty much every play. So I think Morin and Perry are a little too cheap. Roberson's been too cheap all year. I would say his price is pretty close to accurate now. If I was pricing him, which I don't know if that means shit, I put him 6.7, 6.8, somewhere around there, maybe 6.9. Okay, the running back room, a little bit of a mess. They are splitting carries between Beal Smith and Ellison, and even Christian Turner at 3.3 does see some carries as well. I can't make a strong case for either guy while they're splitting carries. I will also say this Wake team, while they like to run the ball a lot, they've been in advantageous game scripts, and they still haven't really done great. They've done okay, but no one guy's sticking out, and they're only 103rd in the country in rushing explosiveness. All right, as far as Syracuse, like I said, big identity changes here. Also a pretty big quarterback shift. They went to Garrett Schrader a couple games ago. He's played in 3 games where he actually got playing time. And he has 7 rushing touchdowns in those 3 games. So he's a runner first, he's a runner second, and he's a runner third. Doesn't really pass the ball very much. Doesn't really pretend to. They're going to keep the ball on the ground a lot. A 6.7K with that rushing upside. I don't hate it. You could also say this is a pretty tough matchup. I would say yes, it is. Florida State's a tough team to read that rushing production against because they have a good defensive line, but they're a very poorly coached team and just not great elsewhere defensively. So it's kind of hard to tell, right, with quarterback runs. I know we had one huge scramble in there. I don't really know, right? It's hard to see how that's going to carry over. I would say Liberty has a good defense. Only averaged 3.3 yards per rush against them, but did have 2 touchdowns. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah, this guy's not afraid to run. This guy's an animal. He's awesome. Kind of like first came into the scene with Mississippi State, getting helicoptered in whatever game that was. That's the kind of player he is. He's pretty cool. All right, Sean Tucker, like I said, massive usage here at 7.2K. I think either him or Schrader's probably going to have a decent game here. Maybe both of them will. Obviously, he had 64 points, but that was against Albany. They stink. Like I said, Liberty has pretty good defense, and he had 30 points there. I think Sean Tucker at 7.2K is not a bad play. All right, as far as the wide receivers, I wouldn't play any. Like I said, they don't throw the ball. But Taj Harris was their target hog, and he's now transferred. So Quealy should be the number 1 guy. He does have 22 targets over his last 3 games. All right, Wisconsin, Illinois. This one should be quick for the most part. Apparently, I just love getting burned betting on Wisconsin. I don't think I'm going to do it here, so they're probably going to cover because I'm not on them. They're going to cover. They're going to wait till the week I hop off. That's how it works. And I will also be honest. I have not watched a single second of Illinois football. I've seen some highlights, but not watched a single second live of Illinois football since that Nebraska game when it was the only game on in week 0. In general, I don't really love watching Big Ten games, and Illinois is not a good Big Ten team. So Wisconsin offensively, let's look at these numbers. EPA, 129th in the country, second from last. Explosiveness, 130th, dead last in the country. I don't know. I don't know what to think about this Illinois defense. They looked very poor early. They've looked better lately. I think most impressively, they only held Maryland to, 20 points, and a 2017 loss was a close loss. They actually almost won that game. Maryland has a decent offense like we discussed. The rush defense has looked better the last 2 weeks, which obviously when you're playing Wisconsin, that's the big worry is the rush defense. But that was against Purdue and Charlotte, which Charlotte, decent offensive team, but should be overmatched against a Big Ten team, especially when they're coached by Brett Bielema, are supposed to be more solid up front in the trenches. And Purdue can't run the ball, haven't been able to in years. So that's the most interesting thing here when looking at Wisconsin. Graham Mertz has been questionable all week. Don't know if he's going to play. Don't really care, to be honest with you. Wouldn't play his backup. Chase Wolf, you might see a 5.2 quarterback against the Illinois defense and consider Chase Wolf. I personally wouldn't. He came in against Michigan, and he had 2 straight turnovers on 2 drives. Back-to-back drives had turnovers against Michigan, so not super encouraging. I will say, wide receiver-wise, Kendrick Pryor does have 18 targets in the last 2 games, which kind of surprised me at 4.3K. Jake Ferguson, their tight end, normally at 3.6. I'd have some ownership interest, but I did have ownership interest more than interest. I had some shares of Ferguson. Didn't get the job done. Sounds like he's hurt. I've heard some people with the program say they don't expect him to play, but he's a tough cat, so we'll see. So Wisconsin running back is Obviously, that's been a gold mine for years and years and years. I hate to break it to you folks, but it has not been the last 2 years. I was a little slow in realizing that. I played Malusi, sometimes I haven't, thinking they'd get back to normal. I don't know why I was convinced Wisconsin would get back to normal. There were signs of weakness last year, and then there are obvious signs of weakness again this year, so we'll see. But Chez Malusi, Clemson transfer, started the year as a workhorse. Last week he only had 6 snaps, only played 6 snaps. So you might say, well, they got blown out. Maybe that was game script. I say maybe, but it wasn't a blowout right from the jump. I would say Jalen Berger at 3.7K, I'd say he also got 8 snaps, so he had snapped him. Then I would say most concerningly of all, they gave Braylon Allen, freshman, actually led the team with 19 yards. How about that? 19 rushing yards, led the team. But he played 8 snaps as well, so it seems like they got a couple guys. They're going to get in there. They've already given Garendo at 3.4K. He already gets the passing usage. He's more of a third down back. So I don't know if I can play Malusi. I don't know if I can play Berger. Braylon Allen at stone cold minimum, you could make a solid case. You could make a compelling case for Braylon Allen. You go ahead and look at Braylon Allen. I had no idea who this guy was. He's a 17-year-old. He's 17 years old. He's 240 pounds. That's interesting. Does it mean he's going to do anything? I don't know. But Illinois, while they've been good defensively against the run 2 straight weeks, they were very poor to start the year. They were poor last year. And this is Wisconsin. If Wisconsin's ever going to get off the schneid, they should be able to run the ball here. Who's going to be doing the rushing work? Like I said, hard to tell. If you're going to give me one of those guys at minimum price, I think he's my favorite minimum price guy. Again, you don't need to play a minimum price guy, but if you do, you set that lineup, you got 3K, Braylon Allen might be your guy. Now, apparently he's played in all 3 games this season that he's been available. He missed one with a concussion, so it looks like they're trying to get him on the field, and they got him on the field. He tied with Berger for the most snaps last week, so interesting one there. Tough to call. I know last year people kept trying to chase Jalen Berger, and he ended up finally having some decent games. I tried to chase him too, and at the end of the day, it just wasn't worth it because the Wisconsin's offense wasn't good enough. So I don't really want to make the same mistake two years in a row, but I don't really know if I recall Jalen Berger ever being a minimum price last year. So we'll see. All right, Illinois offense, skip. Isaiah Williams gets the most targets, converted wide receiver. Yeah, skip Brandon Peters. Hell no. Daniel Barker's their tight end. Usually in a Bielema offense, you get some decent tight end usage at 3.6. That's the only thing I would even consider here. Luke Ford at minimum price. Caught a touchdown for me week 1. That was cool. Caught 3 passes last week. That was cool, but I couldn't get there. All right, so Chase Brown had a monster game last week. That was against Charlotte. Charlotte has a terrible rush defense. Charlotte's also in the Conference USA. They are not Wisconsin. Wisconsin's rush defense is pretty sinister. They're only allowing 1.6 yards per rush. So I can't look to these guys. Josh McCray is another freshman, another huge freshman. Him and what's his name? Braylon Allen. Him and Braylon Allen should be an interesting, huge freshman match if we get to see them play. Yeah, he's been going off. He's a very good player. Did lose the fumble last week, and then Chase Brown kind of took over. So can't play Chase Brown at that price against Wisconsin. Not sure I can play Josh McCray against this defense. All right, last but not least, Penn State, Iowa. Plus 2.5, Penn State. I'll probably end up betting Penn State. I just haven't yet because I think they're the better team, but they're playing at Iowa. Penn State's a team I usually only like to play at home. I do think they're a different team on the road and at home usually. I just am not a believer in Iowa. I still think it's a close game. It's 2 defensive-minded teams. The over-under is only 41.5, so that tells you all you need to know. I just kind of decided maybe I'm just going to sit back and watch this game. But yeah, Iowa, I think they're pretty lucky. I don't think they have a good offense. They've only committed 4 turnovers this season, and they've gotten 16 of them. So a 4 to 16 turnover ratio. Anytime I see something like that, while I know they have good defense, I just can't believe that. Whereas I think Penn State, everything I've seen from them tells me they're a good football team. I think Penn State's offense is much improved under Mike Yurcich, the offensive coordinator. I think that was a huge upgrade. I'm a big fan of him, formerly of Texas and Oklahoma State. They're playing at a little bit more of a pace, but I'm not really sure it'll matter with this low of an over-under. Sean Clifford, I'm not sure you can play him at 7.1K. He's been pretty good this year. He's been impressive. He's made some strides. And he does run the ball a little bit. But at 7K, I just think there are better options. A tough matchup here. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver, has been one of the best wide receivers in college football. I think he'll continue to be one of the best wide receivers in college football. He's a monster. He's really awesome. Really, really awesome. 30 targets over his last 3 games. So seeing 10 targets a game, that's all you need to know. Parker Washington's behind him with 20 targets over that span. And then Lambert Smith has 15 over that span. Washington's at 5K this week. Lambert Smith's at 3.7K. Brenton Strange, the tight end, at 3.4K. Did catch a touchdown at 3.3 last week. Only got a $100 price raise. They just haven't been using him very much. I don't think I'm going to mention the run game at all because it's kind of a mess and they're playing Iowa. So let's just skip it. All right, last but not least, although kind of least, we had Illinois on the slate, and Baylor, and West Virginia. Some tough ones. So last and close to least, Penn State here. Yeah, I'm not playing Spencer Petras. Tough matchup. He's at 5.7K. Had a good game, but that was against Maryland. Don't think we can expect to continue. That was one of his only good games. He's more of a game manager. Sam Laporta, their tight end. We've seen what Iowa does with tight ends, right? Seems like Sam Laporta's the next one. I think he's only a sophomore. Had a good year last year as a freshman. 20 targets over the last 3 games. That leads the team. There you go. Tracy's the guy behind him. Hasn't really done anything at 3.8K. And then Arlen Bruce, I don't think I can get there at 3.7K. Maybe if he was like min-priced. He's an interesting guy. I remember seeing him when he committed to Iowa. I want to say he played like running back or maybe as a Wildcat quarterback in high school. And just like a very athletic, kind of a stockier wide receiver. And yeah, he balled out last week out of nowhere. He had 6 targets on only 13 pass snaps last week, so I'm not really sure that's repeatable. Is it a sign they want to get him the ball going forward? Maybe. It's kind of a wild card in this matchup, but not really something you can play at 3.7, I don't think. Tyler Goodson, very good running back. One of the better running backs in college football. Gets a tough matchup at 6.7K. But he's a good running back, so maybe. He's kind of... So he has 21.5 fantasy points per game. But he's only gotten over 100 rushing yards once. Of course, he was close against Indiana. So I guess we might as well count that. I would like to see him keep getting more receiving usage. If I thought I could rely on that, I might play him in this spot. We see right here, he does have over 100 yards combined in his last 2 games receiving. But one of those was on a huge broken play. Hasn't been super efficient. If you're not efficient against Maryland, are you going to be efficient against Penn State? Maybe not. But he could get 24 carries. Don't really have a strong take either way. All right, so let me just very quickly kind of see what I'm thinking. I haven't really set many lineups. I usually set them later in the week. Overview. And then I'll go over some prize picks. Again, I'm just going to tell you what I've played so far. I'm just going to list. I played 10, 15. I play a lot of volume, so whatever I've written down, I'm going to tell you those. I'll try to make another video later in the week to do that. If not, I will post on Twitter. So anyway, as far as the slate, like I said, there's some good expensive options if you're paying up. I can't really talk you off any of those guys, but very, very hard to get to. If you're looking in the 800 range, I think it's hard to consider anyone other than Rattler. Hooker at 7.9 is fine. Your 7K range is okay. Thompson's okay, right? Bachmeier, I'm not sure I could get there. And then you have the 6K options, which are interesting. You could talk yourself into KJ Jefferson if you think he's healthy enough to go. Garrett Schrader at 6.7 is interesting. And then Talia at 6K. So maybe it's a pay down week. Even Luke Doty. Ugh, I know that one's a tough one to talk yourself into. As far as running backs, I think paying up this week might be the way to go. There's a lot of really good running backs on this slate. Just go ahead and look at those. Those are loaded. Letty Brown's all the way down here. Like I said, I don't love him in this spot. But anytime you see Letty Brown as like whatever he is, the 12th highest price running back, you know it's a pretty good slate for running backs. And the pay down options aren't fantastic unless you're punting. Braylon Allen, I think the expensive prices are the way to go on running backs. As far as wide receivers are always all over. I think they're all over here. The pricing is not too bad. Like Drummond's the highest priced guy, and I don't think I'd pay up to get him. So you might be able to afford some of these guys if you go with the quarterback. So not really a strong take either way. I think the pricing is pretty good on wide receivers. The The pricing's tough on quarterbacks. If you're paying for an elite guy, you probably can't do that for two of them, right? Maybe you could pay for one, pay up at running back, get one of the cheap quarterbacks, mid-range wide receivers, or maybe go Henry, afford a higher price guy. This is kind of the way I'm thinking. Again, I haven't set many lineups, but that's what I'm thinking when I overview the slate. All right, let's get some prize picks. So here's what I've played so far. Again, you can play 2 to 5 entries, 2 to 5 picks per entry. I usually do 5. I had good success with 5. Had some nice hits. I hit 3 of them last week. So on those picks, 15 out of 15, pays out 10 times. Had some nice ones. That's not going to happen every week, but it's been happening enough where I just pretty much only play 5. Unless I have 2, I'm super confident. So I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking. I can tell you they've been hitting like crazy. Good luck finding a better, not to toot my own horn, but good luck finding another college football guy giving out prize picks who are just going to hit 3 of those 10-timers in 1 week. Good luck. But like I said, I'm just bummed because I was planning on doing a show where I could give all those out. And some of them I didn't even get out to Twitter and felt like a real asshole because then I'm like, I hit all these and I said I was going to share them. I didn't. It's just been really tough to get them out. Like I said, I've been playing them last minute. So I'm just trying to tell you as much as I can until I get this ironed out. Anyway, here we go. Because I've seen some bad college football ones. Like I think some of these have been pretty easy. Not everyone's super easy. All right, nothing's easy money. But we've had great success. And I've seen some terrible picks week in and week out with people who are getting obviously way more likes than I do because I don't have a huge following. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Those are terrible picks. Those are obviously terrible. So anyway, I'm just going to give you my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. Dwan Mathis, I played him under 15.5 fantasy points against Cincinnati. Played that, locked that up in a few earlier in the week. Set like a school record for passing, but he's not a great thrower of the football, and they're playing Cincinnati, and one of his top wide receivers is banged up. I think that's down to 14.5 now. I'd still play it there, but I like his under 204.5 passing yards, probably more now that his fantasy points went down. I think either one of those are fine. CJ Stroud over 24.5 fantasy points. Playing Maryland, 24.5, too low. Brandon Peters, Illinois quarterback, under 145.5 passing yards. He almost never gets to that mark, and now they're playing Wisconsin. Good luck. Pretty much any Coastal Carolina over. I played a lot of them. Pretty much any. I'd recommend pretty much any of them. Mainly looking at either Grayson McCall. They're 2 running backs I feel very confident in. Shamari Jones and Reese White. Arkansas defense, one of the worst defenses in the country. Like literally, they're bottom 3 in pretty much everything. Explosiveness, yards per game, whatever you look at. I think Coastal's going to have some good success. Grayson McCall was seen in a walking boot after last game, supposed to play in this one. That makes me a little nervous. That's why I'd probably look to the running backs. I think both of them are going over. You could play their over fantasy points. They're both around 14. You could play their over rushing yards. They're both around 70. And that's Shamari Jones and Reese White. I like pretty much anything for those guys. All right, Jalen Mitchell, I like his overs, running back for Louisville. Like I said, it's tough because he hasn't gotten those touchdowns. So if you think that's going to continue, I think rushing yards is the way to look. Over 71.5 in a good matchup against Virginia. Like I said, is averaging over, 250 rushing yards per game in ACC play. Raheem Jarrett, I do like his overs, like I mentioned. I think probably receptions is the way to go. This one's okay. I don't know if I'd say this is one of my most confident, but I did play it. Over 4 receptions for Raheem Jarrett. With no Dante Demas, he should be the top guy. And so Ohio State defense was letting Tulsa throw the ball on them, which Tulsa scored, what did they score? 10 points last week? Not a good offense. Anyway, I already said that one. Devontae Price, FIU running back. I like his overs. 16.5 fantasy points is a little steep, but Charlotte's rushing defense is very, 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 very poor, and Price is FIU's entire offense. I think Spencer Rattler over 22.5 fantasy points. I think that's fine. I don't love it because he hasn't been great this year, but Texas's defense is not good. Rivalry game, if we ever see Rattler do anything, he should do it here, right? If he's ever going to come out of that. It's not even really a slump. He's completing like whatever he is, 78% of his passes, but yeah. I know this one's tough, but Luke, I don't know if it's Doty or Doty. Luke Doty, South Carolina quarterback, over 12 fantasy points. I think that's too low. I don't think Tennessee's defense is good. Should be a pace-up game. He's had some tough matchups, and he can run a little bit more than he's shown. Jahmyr Gibbs, over 14.5 fantasy points. I think that's too low. He had negative 10 rushing yards last week, which is what most people are going to look at and say, hell no, how can you play that over? I could say, I guess you have a decent point. They're playing Duke. Duke's defense is no good. Jahmyr Gibbs is a threat. He gets receptions. That boosts his floor. I think he's fine. I would also play their quarterback, Jeff Sims, over. I think he's at 21 fantasy points. I'd play that. I'd play Jeff Sims rushing prop over as well. Spencer Petras, quarterback for Iowa, last one. I would play his under 16.5. He almost never hits that mark. Now he's playing a tough Penn State team. So there you go. There's your prize picks. I'll go ahead and put the bookmarks in here. Other than that, thank you for listening. Good luck this week. Hope everyone wins some money. If not, I don't know. It's been 2 straight weeks for us, so we're hoping this week's a good week. So fingers crossed. Other than that, enjoy your weekends, everybody.